Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Jay Williams. I have the privilege and the opportunity of serving as the president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. I have been with the foundation for a year. My wife and my son, our son who is 7, and my mother relocated here a year ago, and have found it to be an exceptionally fulfilling journey, both in terms of the professional experience with the foundation and the personal experience as we have been settling in. And I'm just getting off of a plane. We were in Ohio for some family functions, and I overheard my mother talking about her sisters were asking her how she was settling in. It was interesting to sort of be able to overhear, and she didn't know I was listening, so if she was not liking it, I would have heard that. And but fortunately, and she said no, she really likes the community. She likes the connectivity. She loves the quality of life here. She did lament about the winters, although last winter wasn't terribly bad. And we're from Ohio, so it's like, but I think as she gets a little older, and her birthday was yesterday, so as she gets a little older, she's not old, but I think, she just would appreciate, the warmth, so I'm not sure what we're going to do about that. But she was talking about how over this past year, she has met a number of people, has experienced a number of things that have just really given her a very favorable impression, and my wife and I share those same sentiments. So thrilled to be here out in Windsor, which is the 12th tour stop of a 29 community tour that we have committed to do over the course, starting in February this year and will end in February of 2019, to engage every one of the 29 communities that we serve. So this is the 12th tour stop. This is the 18th town conversation that we've had, and I can tell you that it's been a wonderful experience, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But before we get started, I just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping items. Hopefully some of you have made, or all of you, and if you haven't, make use of the catering tonight by Dom's Broad Street Eatery. It is on my list of places to try for brunch, and I've not been able to get out here, so I'm seeing some nodding affirmation that I need to go ahead and get Dom's Broad Street Eatery, so they've provided catering this evening. Our live doodle by Costanza Veil Designs. She always graces us with her talent in capturing the discussion and the comments that we'll hopefully engage in this evening. We're going to start off with a video that just gives a synopsis, and we'll get right into it. But as I said, our purpose here is to engage in a conversation and more listening than talking about the quality of life here in Windsor, the relationship that we've had with this town, how we would love to be a more impactful and powerful partner with you all moving forward. So to that end, we'll do a brief video and then get into our conversation.
So, you want to leave a legacy?
Why not send me to college?
Help me be a better provider.
Or help support local programs.
At the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, through your generosity, we make both big and small dreams come true. This isn't just a donation, this is an investment. Through our careful financial stewardship, your money will last forever, helping numerous nonprofit organizations in the 29-town greater Hartford area, changing countless lives along the way. It's a tradition that goes back to 1925. The Hartford Foundation for Public Giving is one of the oldest and largest community foundations in the country. We help donors impact the issues they care about, such as education, health, the arts, economic and community development, early childhood, and more. This is your community, and it's our community too. More than 90 years of experience means we understand the big picture, how different issues connect, and what will be needed in the future. The Hartford Foundation is invested in the vibrancy of every town in Greater Hartford. We award grants, share knowledge and data, influence public policy, host events, and build partnerships. But most importantly, we help people like you make a difference. Whether you want to establish a scholarship, join a giving circle, or start your own donor-advised fund, we are here to help. We'll make sure you reach your philanthropic goals, whatever they may be. The gift you give today will make an impact now and for years to come. It's about making Greater Hartford a better place, and you can make a difference. We promise.
So, what will your legacy be?
The Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, together for good. The Hartford Foundation for Public Giving is the largest community foundation in the state of Connecticut. It is one of the largest and oldest community foundations in the entire country. And while we serve the 29 Greater Hartford region, community Greater Hartford region, we are both a regional community foundation and your individual community foundation in the town of Hartford. And having been around for 93 plus years, there are a lot of relationships that have been established. We have benefited from the generosity of generations of individuals who have trusted us with their resources to be a good steward, to invest in the community, to partner with the community, to share and build the knowledge. And while there has been good work that has been done over the course of those 93 years, we recognize that things have changed. The state of Connecticut has changed. Our individual towns have changed. The region has changed, and we don't live in a vacuum. The nation and the world have changed, and those changes have impacted us in sometimes positive ways and sometimes ways that challenge our aspirations. So to that end, I appreciate the fact that as the organization, the foundation, was going through a leadership change, the board was very determined that the foundation had a good, solid base to work from. The foundation has been well run for decades. It has partnered and invested. That being said, the board was very keen on ensuring that we became a foundation that remained relevant, impactful, and were flexible with the change of times that were occurring throughout the region. So in doing that, that has been an ongoing theme. And one of the best ways to ensure that we remain relevant and remain impactful are to go and have intimate conversations with the individuals who matter most to us, our communities, our stakeholders, our donors, our partners, whether you know who we are or not. If you live, work, play, have some vested interest in the town of Windsor and the other 28 communities, you are our greatest partners and assets, and we need and want to have that dialogue. So that's why we committed to this discussion, to have an opportunity to come out of the offices. We love our facilities and do lots of activities in our offices in downtown Hartford. But in order to have a conversation that can be candid and frank in a way that is comfortable for our stakeholders, we want to come to you. And we appreciate the invitation. We appreciate Christine for hosting us here in this wonderful facility. In addition to having a conversation in your town, I get the benefit as still a relatively new resident of seeing firsthand all the communities that we serve. So it's been a great experience in that regard also. So tonight we want to hear from you, asking you to respond to some very straightforward questions of what do you love about the town of Windsor? What are some of your concerns or aspirations or frustrations? How can we as the foundation be a more impactful and valuable partner with respect to what is going on here? So we want to hear from you. The staff has joined me. There are a number of our vice presidents. If the Hartford staff would raise your hand or just wave and indicate, we have a number of our program officers and VPs and development, just an entire, not the entire staff clearly, but a good representation from the staff. And we appreciate the fact that you all are having us here this evening. So as I always start off each one of these, this isn't about me or us giving monologues, soliloquies. This is about hearing from you. So that's how it works best. Hearing from you, and I will say this, I've said it 18 times in our other towns before. Raise your hand, please engage us. We don't have to do an icebreaker. I came in and you guys were chatting and it seemed like a very friendly crowd. If it is a slow start, I always tell people, if you make direct eye contact with me, I will take that as a sign you want to say something. So, you can raise your hand and do it the easy way, or you can try to avoid looking at me, because either way, we're going to have a conversation that really is less about us and what we're saying and really more about what you all aspire and think about the town of Windsor and how we can be a more impactful partner. So to that end, I'd love to open it up. And if you would stand and just give us your name, and again, remember to wait for the microphone. We'll get it to you very quickly. And we're capturing all of this because this is going to help to inform our strategic plan, which is underway as we speak. We are in the final year of our current strategic plan and in the process of working with our board and the entirety of the staff of putting together our strategic plan that will help guide our activities for the next 3 years. There is no more important input than we get from the community. So part of what this conversation will do is help to inform and shape and guide that strategic plan, and this won't be the last time you hear from us. So again, to that extent.
Stand, right? George Slate.
Right.
One of President Carter's most famous speeches was his malaise speech. Page 12 of your annual report notes, oddly in a quick bullet, that Metro Hartford has the 3rd highest per capita income per worker and the 4th highest GDP per worker in worldwide. Do we self-flagellate around here? Do we not know how good we have it? What is your explanation, being an outsider and coming in, of why we think so negatively of not only our region but the state, and is it accurate?
That is a trait, and what a wonderful question to open up on, an observation, because that is a trait that is not unique to Hartford. I have shared with people that my family and I are new to the Hartford region, but we're not new to the Hartford experience. I was born and raised and served as mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, before I spent the last 6 years in Washington, D.C. Youngstown, Ohio and Hartford have uncanny similarities in terms of their history, the growth, the prosperity, then the challenges. Youngstown was a steel town. Hartford was manufacturing, insurance and financial services. So I grew up in a community that was its own harshest critic, was often its own worst enemy, couldn't get out of its own way sometimes. All the while, we'd have people come in and say, wait a minute, there are great assets here, there are great people here, there are great opportunities here. Yes, there are very real and pressing challenges, but sometimes it is difficult to see those positive traits, either when the challenges are so pronounced and it is easier and more when I say sexy, to talk about all the problems. Oh, people are leaving Connecticut. Oh, and this corporation left, that corporation left. We have these issues, and those issues are very real. But it often masks over the fact that there are great assets and opportunities here. We talked about the GDP. To the extent I saw that same data, and obviously we cited it. So to the extent that data has been correlated and validated, there is accuracy there. But that is often not seen, and sometimes it does take an outside perspective, or from someone who has been here and goes away and sees other communities. So that isn't new, that the community often doesn't see the upside of things, because the issues of fiscal stability at the state level are very real and very pronounced, and often are the source of debate, whether it's on the political arena or in the business community. The issues surrounding the financial challenges of the city of Hartford, the school district. So those things are often top of mind, and they overshadow some of the data that you talked about. So having been here a year, I have seen both the positive aspects, which very much excite me, and I think excite a lot of us at the foundation and others about the potential upside, but at the same time recognizing the fiscal issues that the state must address, the structural issues that the state must address, the educational issues, and so many of the other things. So it is, to a certain extent, a dichotomy where there are those very positive attributes and traits that exist here, but they are often overshadowed. So I think part of what we want to do is not to look at the community through rose-colored glasses or to be Pollyannish and ignore the very real challenges that exist. But there are, I can tell you this from firsthand experience, there are dozens of communities across the country. And I had a chance over the past 6 years as an Assistant Secretary of Commerce in the Economic Development Administration to travel across the country. It brought me to Hartford here on a number of occasions to see communities that would kill to have some of the upside potential that the greater Hartford region has. There still is a corporate presence here. There are people here who are tenacious, who are entrepreneurial in their thinking. There's a quality of life here that other communities that might seem on paper to be further ahead, but having seen that firsthand, I can tell you one of the things, as my wife and I both contemplated where we were going to go after the administration ended, and certainly Ohio was at the top of our list, the opportunity to come here, having traveled across the country, was exceptionally appealing. So while challenges abound, in my mind, and I think a lot of minds of the others, they do not outstrip the potential upside assuming that we have the leadership, and we need the leadership at the political level, we need the leadership at the corporate level, but the engagement of individuals such as you and so many of your other fellow citizens is exceptionally important. So thank you.
Hi, Jay.
Hey.
So I have a question, and as a mom and as a grandmother, what would be your top 3 ideas in improving education in our Windsor schools, even for your child?
That's a great question, and my wife and I do have a 7-year-old son. She is much more involved in education than I, so I don't know that I have, because there aren't easy ideas. One of the things that she has demonstrated that I admire and see it in so many other is the level of engagement that parents and guardians have. Nowadays, our educators are faced with so many challenges, being educators and counselors and disciplinarians and social workers and all the things that our children come to school with. And those children come from various backgrounds and various experiences. So to the extent that there is that high level of engagement by parents or guardians and individuals who may not have children in the school district, that importance. Perhaps you never had children, or perhaps your children are grown and are gone on and doing other things. But the notion of offering oneself, one's talent, and one's time to schools are exceptionally important. There's always the funding issue. The state of Ohio education was declared unconstitutional 15, 20 years ago. Still, nothing has been fundamentally done about it. Same thing exists here. That's a decision that has to be made by those who are in elected positions. Funding's beyond our control to a great extent, but level of engagement and offering time and talent in a variety of ways are ideas that we have seen. And education is something that we invest in heavily at the foundation, and figuring out new and innovative ways to provide quality education in the classroom and quality experiences and supportive programs outside of the classroom are also things that we've found to be successful through our partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. You
Uh-huh.
answered my question. Thank you.
Karen, did you have your hand up? Sorry. Yeah.
I did, Karen and Karen Kiley. And I was more of a question to you is I'm here, I do a lot of fundraising for the Windsor Recovery Club, which you can see almost out the window
Windsor
here.
Recovery Club?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're having kind of a turnover of where we want to do something to involve more young people to come in and feel safe and want to come there, to get sober, whatever it is, and have information available, whether there's a Greater Hartford, like a kiosk we could put there, or some kind of informational systems. And I wondered what you had seen maybe in other areas, other towns you've been to that we might think about.
Sure. Well, we'd love to have that conversation. I don't know firsthand of programs, but part of what we do is sharing that knowledge with the other 28 communities in a Greater Hartford region. But we have also established relationships with our fellow community foundations across the region. The Community Foundation of Greater New Haven, Eastern Community Foundation, Fairfield County, and others. Yeah, and those are community foundations, and they're family foundations. So we belong to the Connecticut Council on Philanthropy. So in addition to, and I would invite you to call and have a conversation, we can connect you with our program officers who may have experience with other towns in our region. And if that isn't the case, certainly our relationships with others about what towns have done to make awareness, increase awareness and engagement. So that is such an asset to have that here. As an outlet and a resource for our young people. So does it focus just on young people, or is it all ages?
We're trying to actually find more things that we can advertise that we're there for the young
Okay.
people. Most of our people there now are including, I'm in recovery, and that was where it was one of the most important things in my life, a decade plus ago. And the people that were the opiate problems in the schools, and I don't know if we have any kind of good relationship with the schools, the high school.
Okay.
Anything to open up more communication to let younger people know we're there for them.
We'd love to have that conversation. And as a matter of fact, about 2 months ago, we hosted an opiate summit at the foundation. We brought in 2 or 3 speakers to talk about how that issue has impacted this region and some of the additional resources and outlets. So we'd love to stay connected with you around that. Thank you. We have 2 up here. The Armstrongs.
Hi, Richard Armstrong. One of the questions I have is that we as a group, as a couple, have been involved in many organizations, and one of the problems that we keep seeing is the elderification of all those organizations, very few young people are joining. What are some of the suggestions that might be raised to get younger people involved in any of the organizations?
In terms of volunteerism?
Volunteerism in total.
So you have continued a streak that we've heard in every one of our community conversations about the challenge in getting, there's another, did you want to come? Okay, we'll come back. There's an ongoing challenge about getting volunteers engaged. So while there isn't an easy answer, part of what we committed to last session was a few weeks ago is that we are working to try to convene in 2019 a summit of all of our communities to talk about ways and explore ways to increase volunteer engagement in nonprofit organizations across all 29 of our communities. Because we've heard it with such a consistent need and at such a high level of concern, we are going to engage our fellow community foundations across the region to see if there are thoughts and approaches that they have found to be successful. We're going to tap into our network of community foundations in other parts of the country, but our goal is hopefully in the first quarter, but sometime in early 2019, to bring together all 29 communities for a substantive conversation and hopefully have some experts come in to talk about that very issue. Volunteers in general, but then you brought up the issue of volunteers along the age spectrum. We want a diverse cadre of volunteers. That is so important to the work that is going on in our community, so thank you for raising that. I think his wife Joyce had a...
Hi, thank you. We've lived in several areas of Connecticut at this point. We came from other states originally. And we noticed that in Connecticut, there doesn't seem to be much regionalization, generally speaking. I'm wondering, are there good role models out there that, maybe had that issue but have been able to develop that? I just don't see that in Connecticut. Every little town is its own tiny, fiefdom and...
All 169, right?
Yes, yes. And I just don't understand how we could be, next to all these other towns or within a few miles and not be working together on much of anything.
You have identified another challenge. Early on, that was one of the things they said, Jay, if you don't remember anything else, remember there's 169 towns, all special places, all wonderful, have a very historic right. That being the case, that can often work against the community because we exist, whether we acknowledge it or not, we exist as a region. And we are looked upon as a region when it comes to investment opportunities. So that is, again, not a situation that is unique to Connecticut. I've experienced it back in the Mahoney Valley in Ohio. I've seen it in other places. That being said, it is also, in certain instances, an impediment to our growth and our success. Because in limited resources, and there are always limited resources, and there are always opportunities, those areas of the country that have been able to work more together as a region have seen, it is not a guarantee of success, but the bifurcation of these communities by zip codes and town boundaries and property lines is almost certain to result in underperformance in terms of the quality of life and opportunities to increase. And it's easier said than done because people, it's a great idea. Oh, wait a minute, you mean it affects my town? Oh, well, now, I'm not quite sure that's such a great idea when you talk about it, except for, so other areas of the country, and there are various models. Some regions have actually consolidated city, county government. Some regions have formed, there's lots of councils of government. Some of them are more just on paper. Some of them actually have abilities that the towns and the citizens. So there are a whole host of approaches, but it really starts with a recognition that we exist as a region. The issues that impact Hartford aren't just Hartford's issues. Those issues are Avon issues, Windsor Lock issues, infield issues. So if we can find those common areas and start there, those areas that people don't have to initially make too much of a sacrifice, but at the end of the day, it ultimately does come down to, are we willing to perhaps change the way, when I say we, as collectively citizens and as towns, try something new, to take a risk, to say, does a joint approach to economic development have some merits? We're not saying right now that we got to merge police stations or fire stations. Start with the things that people perhaps are a little bit less sensitive about and see some successes there, and then get into broader issues. Because, when you live in Windsor or Windsor Locks, you want good quality services, good quality of life. If there is, let me just use a regional, emergency response center. I've seen examples where we've had a 911 center in Youngstown, Ohio, and there was a 911 center for the county that was literally across the street. I don't think people care where the 911 center is. They just know if they call 911, they want the emergency responder there. But we get hung up on things that technologically, and there are other approaches too. So it's an ongoing conversation. We think as a regional foundation, it's an issue that we will continue to discuss and convene around. We think if we can incentivize that, that's something we can and should and will continue to do. But at the end of the day, the citizens have to say, we're willing to try something new. And if we can point to other successes in other parts of the country and say, well, let's try this approach. If it doesn't work, that's okay. But if it does, it might lead to something else. So you're absolutely right. Please.
Thank you. I needed to add on to that comment about regionalism because, first of all, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving is a perfect example of regionalism, where 29 communities for decades have come together in the private sector and to support the nonprofit, public nonprofit sector. And there's also a tremendous amount of work that is happening on a regional basis, currently through the Capital Council Region of Governments. Tremendous amount of work. I'd encourage folks to look at their website. There's a lot of work that's happening, as you said, in some of those low-hanging items of fruit. And so I'd encourage folks to look at that. But also as an example in our own backyard right here with the Bradley Development League, which is the towns of Windsor, Windsor Locks, East Granby, and Suffield, who for 25 years now have been working together to promote our 4 communities around the airport and how we can work better together. And we each contribute a relatively small amount of money in partnership with the Airport Commission to help promote that area. So there's a lot of things that are happening. It may not be those grandiose, big, we're not consolidating police departments, fire departments, but there is work going on, and I encourage everyone here to do that. But I also really wanted to point out that the foundation itself is a great example of a region coming together and helping all the communities. I do have a comment. For those who don't know me, I'm Peter Souza. I'm town manager here. And I'm looking more at, from a nonprofit, the small nonprofit as they get started, and how the foundation may be able to continue the support for those groups in that first 1 to 3 to 5 years. Sure. Similar to small businesses,
Absolutely.
as you know, Jay, that difficulty. And so I just put that out there for your thoughts.
So Peter, thank you for coming, and thank you for, as a elected official and a leader in the public sphere, for saying that. Because I'll tell you that there are lots of conversations that elected and leaders will have behind closed doors, and so, oh, this is a great idea, but standing in front of their constituents aren't as inclined to say that. So the leadership that has been demonstrated from those, you and your colleagues on that level for 25 plus years is remarkable. And it reminds me, again, just an hour ago I'm on a plane, we're flying into Bradley, and when you look down, you don't see Granby and East Granby and Windsor Locks, you see a region with opportunity. So to your question about nonprofits, we have within the foundation a nonprofit support program, and that team has a great deal of knowledge and experience and expertise in addressing nonprofits that are startups, nonprofits that find themselves going through various transitions, whether they be leadership transitions, a need for some technological help, board development. And they have really established themselves as a premier group within the foundation. They are absolutely part of the foundation, but with a focus on those smaller nonprofits. So I would invite you, if you're not aware, to go through our website, to give us a call, and have a conversation with our NSP team, the Nonprofit Support Program team. They have a variety of connections and relationships with consultants, and we provide those resources to our smaller nonprofit partners at no cost. And they also have a variety of grant programs that are available to our nonprofits. And those early years can be tough. You all know that. Well, not even just early years. Any year in a nonprofit can be tough, but certainly the early years, getting started, trying to have a board that understands and fulfills its role. Fund development is always a challenge. And then providing service, because at the end of the day, it's about providing whatever service it is to the residents, to your constituents, or your community. And those other things, the earlier that you can get a firm grasp on those things, the more it allows you to effectively impact and serve whatever mission it is that you have. So by all means, our NSP program is supported by the entirety of the foundation. So I would invite you to explore the website and to call us and have a conversation with our NSP team. Thank you.
I'm Diane Whitney. I would just like to invite you to maybe explain what the Catalyst Society is,
Sure.
which is also a regional approach.
Absolutely. So our Catalyst is one of our 3 giving circles. We have the Catalyst Giving Circle, which is the oldest, the Black Giving Circle, and the Latino Endowment Fund. Those giving circles are a group of individuals who have come together, and each of the giving circles establishes its approach in terms of how much to contribute to be a part of that. And it's a very reasonable nominal contribution. And they come together and decide amongst themselves around issues within the community they want to study, they want to learn more about, and ultimately support through their philanthropy. And we're excited because while the giving circles have been with us for some time, we are in conversations with them about going in even more exciting directions, because there are any number of issues of interest, and they represent a diverse group of individuals from across the community. You don't have to be Black to join the Black Giving Circle or Latino to join the Latino Endowment Fund. They're all completely open in terms of their membership, but the approaches that they've taken allow them to get into some very specific issues that they find of interest. And we support them through our research and evaluation, through staff time to help convene and bring in speakers. So I would encourage you, again, either the Catalyst Giving Circle, the Latino Endowment Fund, or the Black Giving Circle, cover a variety of topics and interests. And the conversations we've been having, and I think that as we get into the balance of this year and certainly next year, to really format and have a couple of different options for those in some new affinity groups that will allow individuals to convene around an interest that they collectively have. They make a determination amongst themselves of voting for how they want to fund and what they want to fund. So it's really an opportunity to be engaged in philanthropy at a very approachable level. Some people are engaged in philanthropy because they have 7 or 8 figure net worth, and they like to do it through that. Others say, you know what, I want to contribute $25 a month or $50 a month, whatever the threshold is for that particular circle that you join. But it's exciting because it expands the reach of philanthropy. In philanthropy isn't determined by your net worth. You don't have to have a trust fund. You don't have to have reached a certain point of a net worth. Philanthropy is, the root word, philo and anthropy, the love of mankind. So it's about the fellow citizens, and no matter where they choose to give their time or their talent or their resources. So thank you for bringing that up. That's one of the areas that we're always interested in hearing some of the topics and some of the discussion that go on within each of our 3 giving circles. Here, Patrick.
Well, thank you. I'm Patrick Cummins. I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Audubon Society, and we're a statewide independent conservation organization founded in 1898, and we work to conserve birds, other wildlife, and their habitat through environmental education, advocacy, and direct conservation efforts. And the Hartford area really is special in that it's got a juxtaposition of so many people living in such proximity to great habitats. From the floodplains, extensive floodplains of Windsor going all the way down to Rocky Hill, to the extensive forests of Glastonbury and Manchester, to the Connecticut River itself with its tidal reaches that go all the way up to the Massachusetts border. It really has spectacular areas for people to go out and explore and to unwind and to connect with nature, all within the site of the state's capital. And few other places in the country have that juxtaposition of so many people and so many great areas. particularly important in this region are the grassland bird habitats, including Windsor's Northwest Park here, which is a great place. But even within the city of Hartford itself, it has habitat for state endangered species, including the grasshopper sparrow and the old landfill, and also almost the entire state's population of upland sandpipers are right here in the Hartford region. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities to work to conserve the environment in the Hartford region for the benefit of the residents. And there are a couple of ready-made partners in the Friends of the Silvio Conti National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. Okay. They work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to conserve the Connecticut River and its watershed. And there's some early stages of discussion to form a Urban National Wildlife Refuge partnership in Hartford. And that's an area to sort of bring national wildlife refuges to the urban areas rather than having people to have to go out to travel to visit another area. Let me see if there were some other points I wanted to make sure I covered here tonight. But Connecticut Audubon Society is a proud member of the Friends of Conti, but there are a whole multitude of groups that work there, and we'd be happy to work with you on, especially on issues regarding the Connecticut River watershed and Hartford Urban National Wildlife Refuge Partnership. And Connecticut Audubon Society utilizes a lot of these habitats through our Science and Nature program, where we actually bring 3rd grade through 8th grade students out into use nature as a classroom and teach them STEM-based curricular-based standards, bringing them out in there and collecting real-world data that will hopefully train them for jobs in the future to be conservation and science leaders of the future. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk tonight. And
well, thank you. And we would welcome, please, a conversation about that in 3 or 4 of the last half dozen of our community conversations. This issue of the environment and the quality of life has come up. In fact, I don't see her here tonight. There was a young lady who was joining us at each of these to talk about the river, Connecticut River watershed, and the importance of protecting that, and the tributaries that run across, again, another regional issue. You know, these tributaries and this watershed runs across multiple towns. So we would love to have that conversation. And personally, as a father of a 7-year-old who's always collecting twigs and rocks and asking endless numbers of questions, that we try to answer. Programs like that are of exceptional importance. So thank you very much. And those partnerships, that's another thing, are trying to leverage and expand partnerships, some of which we know about, and create new partnerships. So we'd really welcome that conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Joyce.
It's more of an observation that what's going on in Hartford at this point, in many ways, there's a renaissance happening, and it's really exciting to see. I grew up in Boston, and when I first saw Hartford, I thought, how could this be the capital of Connecticut? Because it was so small, and there was nothing here. But over the years, I've grown to care about Hartford and love it. I worked in Hartford as a state employee until this past January for many years. And to see the yard goats and the soccer team that's coming in, and the University of Connecticut branch moving there, and all the housing and apartments, and hopefully everybody can benefit from that in the long run, and not just have it be gentrification. I went through that as a kid myself in Boston. Urban renewal was horrible. I don't want to see that happen with people, but I want to see everybody be able to enjoy and benefit from not just the 29-town region, but all of Connecticut. We have good things here in Hartford to come and do and see.
Without question. And the renaissance of Hartford is of benefit to the region. And we make this argument that a better Hartford is a better Windsor, is a better Avon, is a better, and vice versa. So that's that notion of seeing ourselves as a region. People can live in any town in Connecticut, any other 69, or certainly within our region, and still root for and want to see Hartford, East Hartford, Manchester succeed on every level, because the cultural richness that exists in this region isn't owned by any particular town. It is owned by the collective region. So to the extent that renaissance that you talked about that is underway in Hartford provides opportunities for people who perhaps want to live there or enjoy the cultural, the educational amenities, and then also enjoy the quality of life in a town like Windsor, it doesn't have to be either or. And we have to stop looking at it as a zero-sum game. If Hartford gets something, that means something else is taken away from somewhere else, or vice versa. If the suburbs have something, that means that's bad for the city. Having spent 6 years in Washington, D.C., I still chuckle at the notion that there is no place you can't reach within our region, even on a terrible traffic day, without 45 minutes. When I see them put up the 5 or 10 minute delay on I-84, I'm like, why even bother? That's not a delay. That's what? Yeah. So the ease of getting to the communities, and I laugh at my staff laughs when they talk about when we're trying to figure out where to have things, and it's like, oh, you got to go over the mountain. And I'm like, you got to go over Avon Mountain, or you have to. It's not directly off of the freeway. That's just foreign to me, having, Washington, D.C. traffic, the ability to connect to one another. So you're right, that is a great renaissance for the region, and we're excited about some of the things that the foundation is being more involved in, community and economic development, using its resources to help leverage projects in any of the 29 communities in ways that are much different than we've done before. Thank you. And you had a question too, Doris? Okay.
How you doing? My name is Rasheem Jones.
Rasheem?
I work with a youth-based organization here in Windsor called the Cinnamon Tree.
Cinnamon Tree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we work with youth to help them do mentoring and supportive service to help them reach their full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I also am from Boston, Mass. And something I found, like growing up in the city, there's always things to do for youth, but I feel like here in Windsor, there's not much things to do for youth for them to do.
Okay.
So I feel like the quality of life for them isn't like the same because they really can't enjoy their youth the same, I feel like, versus other youth from other cities. So I just feel like that's something I noticed here.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming here. One of the challenges we've had, and as we've had these conversations, is that we want to see a diversity from the town that is as diverse as the town. So we've struggled to have the voice of young people be a part of this. So thank you. You're clearly younger than I am. So you're working with young people, and some of your partners or friends that you brought along. Good. All right. So and would love to hear from them too. Thank you. So bringing that as a part of the quality of life, there are a couple of things. One, we would love to have a conversation with you about the Cinnamon Tree and some of the things you're doing and how we might partner. Two, another thing that we hope to have come out of this is how might we position resources within the community that the community itself can begin to make decisions about providing opportunities for youth and some of these things. So our grant making goes on an annual basis, and we have the formal approach, and we welcome and invite our nonprofit partners to engage in that process. Over and above that, though, we also are getting a lot of discussion and feedback about potentially anchoring resources within a community that the community itself can utilize to address some of these issues. And sometimes we've heard issues in some of the communities about senior centers. We've heard issues around skate parks. We've heard issues about intergenerational opportunities to bring our seniors and our young people together in a whole host of ways. We were in either Granby or East Granby, and there was a desire to have an arts center where young people could really express themselves through their artistic talent. So would love to have that conversation and invite you to have a conversation with us about specifically some of those issues, and then more broadly about how we can provide resources that the town of Windsor can begin embarking upon some of these things through a collaborative civic process. Thank you very much. You want to say something too? No? Not right now? All right. Let me know. Doris? Yeah.
Good evening. And I'm Doris Arrington, and I'm a resident of Windsor, and I raised a daughter here who's now moved on to the big city, but that's what they like to do. But I also work in downtown Hartford. I'm the Dean of Student Services at Capital Community College, and I just wanted to speak to the part of young people and engagement and civic engagement specifically, because I see young people every day who want to be engaged in civic engagement and are very creative, like this young man who is speaking, and they do programs. We have opened up our doors for many years on Saturdays to host programs for free for young people who and other organizations to partner with them. So they were doing everything from exploring science to learning how to be entrepreneurs. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us. There's also an opportunity, and I believe in mentoring because someone had to mentor me, and that when many of us serve on boards, and I'm really have tried to get off 29 boards, but but I try not to leave without maybe recommending a young person who wants to, maybe it's their first board. And so there are ways to bring someone else along and to get young people engaged so they'll be involved in whether it's the town of Windsor or Hartford, Connecticut.
And Doris, when you said we open our doors, this is a particular organization?
Capital Community College opens its doors
good.
on Saturday.
Good.
Whether it's for Delta Academy or for many years we ran the YMCA Youth Achievers program, and many of those people now I see them and they're quite the professionals.
Very much so. I've had a chance to engage some of them.
Yeah.
Very, very
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah.
And civic engagement across the age spectrum is something that is an ongoing conversation with the foundation as we speak. We think about civic engagement often during election season, and that's important, but civic engagement well beyond that is something. So to the extent our young people are inspired and excited, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Althea Banbury, and I live here in Windsor. I moved from Massachusetts and spent most of my time in Massachusetts. I have 2 children, and one of the topics that I was questioning was around that inter-age engagement. You've already addressed that. And that more applies to my younger child who's going into middle school. But I have a question in regards to my older daughter who just finished graduate school. What are some of the things that you've seen as you've done your work in other communities, whether here in Connecticut or outside of Connecticut, that are really helping to kind of keep those, entering their professional life, children and individuals still engaged in their community? My daughter loves Windsor. She more or less grew up here, but it's a question about whether she's going to be able to realistically stay in Windsor. So what are some of the things that you've seen that communities are doing to keep that demographic?
And that's a huge challenge across the country, especially when it's easier when you have a New York or a Boston where you've got cities that just have mass and can offer those things, and much bigger challenge. But part of what I have seen and we have seen is the acknowledgement of the fact that the individuals who, I don't want to just say millennials but that's sort of the easy thing of that generation, is that they very much are about their ability to, they're not following the traditional pathway. When I came up in banking, this is what you did, here's a management training program, and you do this, and eventually you sort of make your way out. They're coming, not looking in a linear sense of their careers. So a lot of them are very entrepreneurially driven. They don't want to go, they're not going to do a 9-to-5 for 30 years and then have a pension and then go off and sort of, but to the extent that communities have started to create an entrepreneurial climate, places where they may have, what we would define as a traditional job, but they do not see themselves as there for, decades upon decades. They see themselves as being able to be entrepreneurial, as being able to use, ideas and thoughts and technology. So some communities, a number of communities, have created, and again, I don't want to oversimplify it by saying an incubator space, but spaces where those individuals can come and have access to technology and other like-minded individuals, where they have access to those of us who have lived a few years and not in a traditional mentor. So you're absolutely right, we all need mentors, but in an idea of being able to share some of the knowledge that we have, and they can take that and apply it to whatever new ideas and new approaches they have. Communities that have, instead of traditional economic development where we want that next factory or trying to get that next sort of retail box store, have recognized that this generation, because of technology, this generation can generate opportunities, whether it's because they just want to be in employment of one, or they ultimately come with an idea that allows them to network. So really just how communities have approached welcoming that in a different way in terms of sometimes their, again, economic investments, recognizing that providing opportunities for young people like that want to live in places, so zoning allowing old developers to come develop old and adaptively reuse warehouses and factories that give them that sense of place. So it isn't easy. There isn't a one size fits all. But there was a period of time where communities just approached it. Here's what we try to attract. Here's how we do it. Here's how we go about, and expected sort of the younger people to fit into that mode, as opposed to also inviting them in to the discussion about how a community can develop, what makes a community appealing and attractive. Not every, we've all been through that period of our life, or a lot of us, but not every, young person wants to say, okay, I got my education, now I'm going off to New York or Boston or Los Angeles. That's all great, and a lot of them do and realize, ooh, man, this is, it's expensive. One of the great things about the greater Hartford region is that you have a quality of life and you can still have sort of the big city experiences, but in a very affordable or approachable way. You can start a business here and not have that business work out and start another business until you find some success, in a way that you might have one shot in a Boston, New York. I mean, just it is so cost prohibitive if you can even get in the door, versus being able to do that somewhere in a greater Hartford region. And then if you want to hop on a train or a car and be in Boston, New York, you can do that too. So the notion of positioning Hartford as an attractive, appealing place between two major metropolitan areas, but again, that's something that requires regional thinking. And it also requires us not telling young people what we're going to do, but inviting them to be a part of that conversation and ceding a little bit of that authority and taking some risks. That's the other thing, is that we've got to become much more tolerant of risk and doing things differently to attract that. But once they get a foothold here, that's the best commercial you'll ever get, because amongst their peers, they begin to then spread that word and say, oh, this is a place that we're welcome. This is a place that has the amenities and the opportunities that they're very, very appealing. So other communities have sort of figured that out, but it's a mindset, and stop sort of this lecturing and say, because we're older and we've been around longer, we know what's best, this is how it's going to be. And those communities have had some success in doing that. And it's really it's a challenge, but one well worth taking some risk and making some investments in, because of the brilliance and the opportunities and the additional quality of life that that generation brings to a community, that they find appealing. Yes, sir.
Once again, talking about the regionalism of Hartford, we have two other major metropolitan areas within the state of Connecticut. Are we at a zero-sum game with them, or are we collaborating with them, or are we cooperating with New Haven and Stanford?
So I can say, and I've only been here a year, I can say that there is, at least from a foundation standpoint, we are very much on a regular basis engaged in conversations with the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven in terms of approaches and opportunities. And as a matter of fact, we also are in regular conversation with the Fairfield County Community Foundation, and we have collaborated on some approaches and projects that have been of statewide concern. So from the community foundations, there is collaboration, but beyond that, I really can't speak to how much collaboration. I have heard, and certainly, there's the notion from a geographical standpoint that Fairfield County, in certain ways, identifies itself with the New York market, and then there's like the rest of Connecticut. I've heard that, and certainly there's some validity to that. So I can tell you that we do think it's important for us as the Capital Region's Community Foundation to reach out and have a productive relationship, and we very much do. So Juanita James of Fairfield County, Will Ginsburg of New Haven, Miriam Elahi of Easterns, we are working that from our standpoint, and also utilizing our platform to convey that on a statewide level. Hopefully we'll see more of that from an economic standpoint, political standpoint. So that's, in such a small state, to have that bifurcation of sort of Fairfield County and the rest of Connecticut, isn't productive, but the reality of the situation is probably going to exist. So, we're not going to let it be an impediment to our relationship with those foundations. Thank you. Cynthia?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Martin. Nice to see you, Jay.
You too.
I'm with the National Conference for Community and Justice, and we are the great beneficiaries of so much funding and support from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. And you've talked about collaborating with many of the other community foundations, and I think that's fantastic. So I want to talk about collaborating amongst not-for-profit organizations. So I'm a New York City woman and spent all my adult life working in New York City, and we were part of what was called a couple of different collective impact models. So that we brought a variety of non-for-profit organizations together to make a bigger impact where one not-for-profit couldn't handle the work.
Right.
So sometimes it's a conversation on, and what I'm asking is, where's the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving in this model, and have you been thinking about it? And how does it work with a cross-sector too? Because why can't corporations be part of that model too? The other part I want to say is one of the gifts of Connecticut is there are so many not-for-profit organizations.
Right.
Maybe TOO, not-for-profit organizations. Too many. But that's what I'd like to see, and that's definitely what I would like to be involved in, right? There's many of us who are doing similar work, looking to, as like NCCJ, looking to make change for our young people, right? So, it's gone. So how can we bring people together to the table so that there's not a competition for funding, but a collaboration and a working together for funding? And I'd love to be part of that conversation, but I want to know if Hartford Foundation's been talking about this, and where that.
Count us in. We've absolutely been talking about that. As a matter of fact, we are in the process of convening. Again, we're community foundations. I've made several references to our collaboration with other community foundations, but in doing that, perhaps, shortchange the fact that we see our convening as one of our most important tools and approaches. And when I say convening, it isn't just convening of community foundations. So to your extent of we are reaching out to corporate foundations and family foundations, we are reaching out to corporations themselves. We are all about that level of collaboration between nonprofit organizations. And they're mission driven. They're limited resources. And the reality is sometimes they see one another as competitors. Oh, there's only, here's the pile of dollars, so if you've got that slice of the pie, that means there are fewer slices of the pie. And yes, resources are limited, but the reality, if this is about the mission, and if this is about being impactful, then the first thing should be what is the best, most effective approach? And if that means collaborating with another organization that happens to be in a similar space, but there's a greater and more effective outcome, we hope that is the North Star behind it. And we're not unrealistic to the realities of boards and, and leadership and organizations wanting to survive. So we are a big proponent of that. We think it's incumbent upon us to incentivize and encourage and talk very openly about that collaboration between organizations, providing mechanisms to help facilitate that. So we're there, welcome that conversation, and to the extent that we have success there, that has implications far beyond, the nonprofit, because that's part of the challenge in terms of, there's always going to be public resources as a part of this equation. So the extent that we can show and demonstrate some leadership, and sometimes have to bring along some of the public leadership around that issue. So we're there. Welcome that conversation, and the staff has been eager to reach out and leverage those relationships across the spectrum. Absolutely. Two over here.
I'm Christine Ermans from the Windsor Historical Society, and you mentioned corporations, which made me think we have a bit of an unusual situation here in Windsor. in that in the 1950s and 1960s, there were all these tobacco fields and agricultural fields, and what the leadership decided to do was establish a corporate business area on Day Hill Road. And I think as a result of this, we have a whole lot of people who work in Windsor, and then they go home. And so I think there is an opportunity for some modeling of volunteerism, some modeling of corporate support. I am the director, and so I do a lot with fundraising, and I can't get to square one. So I'm thinking there probably is a leadership role, not just for Windsor Historical Society, but we're very, very rich in nonprofits, as you said. There are all kinds of wonderful causes in Windsor. And I wonder if there's anything that the Hartford Foundation could do to sort of facilitate this community involvement on the part of our businesses and corporations.
I think so. Again, as I said, as we are convening a discussion and a symposium around volunteerism in 2019, I think we can consider the same thing as it relates to our corporations. So prior to that, I'm going to be reaching out to a number of the corporate CEOs to reintroduce the Hartford Foundation as a potential partner in the development of our greater 29 community region. And as a part of that discussion, we'll be happy to talk about that level of engagement, because there are, some of them are Fortune 500 companies, a number of them are small family corporations, but this area still is blessed with a presence of corporate. And so corporate, again, doesn't mean, you know, stock exchange corporate. Some of that exists here, but those family corporations, those family businesses, even if they're not incorporated, a number of them, as I drove in and saw the business parks and industrial parks and the small family organizations. So would be happy to have that conversation, that convening, and see us as a convener. Happy to bring together those individuals, and it's, you know, our platform gives us an opportunity to do that. So let me ask you a question, since you talked about that, and I've always been curious, and maybe you could, if someone here can answer. So as we're flying out, the big red barns, the big red, are those former tobacco?
They're tobacco sheds.
Tobacco
They're not
sheds.
barns. They're
Okay.
tobacco sheds.
But did I see a farm coming in? They look like the tobacco. Some of the tobacco farms are out in this area too. Okay, I've always been curious. You see these strategically placed sheds that. Okay, well, thank you, Kitty.
Park, you can actually go and see some up close.
Where?
Northwest Park.
Oh, okay, good. Kitty.
So I'm Kitty Tyrell. I also work at the NCCJ here in Windsor, but I'm also a resident of the Greater Hartford region. I'm curious, given the last year, especially with a lot of the state fiscal problems, what organizations or what causes went by the wayside that still have a need to be addressed potentially in this community, but you know, either the business went belly up or they closed their doors? Or were you able to articulate any of that in terms of the Hartford region?
I'm not sure in particular. So I've only been here a year. I know that prior to my arrival, and we continue to do that, we bolstered the resources that we had available to nonprofit organizations that were experiencing cuts because of the state fiscal. So our transitional operating support are grants that we provide to organizations who, you know, perhaps are looking for a merger or who just need to survive this unanticipated state or city or federal budget cut to survive. So it has impacted organizations across the board. Some of them were, have been more impacted than others. But we would happy to connect you with our community investment team, who would have more specific information about what they've seen. And again, that goes to this notion of having to do things differently, having to approach this differently, because the state fiscal situation isn't going to be fixed anytime soon. You know, we went from one crisis to, we have a budget, and before the ink was dry on that budget, they were already reporting on the next multi-$100 million deficit, because these are structural issues. So to that extent, we know that we have a role, but we can't do it alone, which goes to this level of collaboration and encouragement. And trying to make sure that we have those relationships across the region. So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. I don't want to, if there's anybody who we didn't, yeah.
10 years ago, for the midterms, one major political party realized the importance of census data on redrawing voting districts, and the other party is now doing that with attention focused on the past president and attorney general. So the question is, over the next 18 months, will the Hartford Foundation target making grants to ensure that as many census forms are filled out for people in the area, and two, that they complete it completely enough so that the needs of Hartford region are fully collected, because over the next decade, that is the basis for how the federal government will allocate resources?
Answer is absolutely unequivocally yes. We are engaged with, and this is something that, again, we can't and aren't doing by ourselves. There are conversations underway as we speak. We are nonpartisan, obviously, so we don't engage in partisan political activity, but making sure that we have a complete count is not a partisan political activity. That is a necessity for our own survival, because as you talked about, the census determines for the next decade how federal funds are apportioned to communities. So it is the height of irresponsibility for us collectively not to ensure that there is a complete and accurate count within a greater Hartford region. So to the extent that we're doing that, we're working with other organizations, not just foundations, but nonprofit organizations to do that. It's a part of our civic engagement. So as I said a few minutes ago, civic engagement isn't just about election season and voting. That's important, but that's one component of a much broader awareness campaign, an education campaign, making sure people are aware of their rights, making sure people understand the importance of that census, what it can and can't be used for, and why we have to ensure that the greater Hartford region has a complete and accurate count to the extent that we can help facilitate that. So absolutely yes, and it's part of, I think, the obligation we have, but we can't do it alone. So thank you for your passion around that interest and for the organizations that are engaged in that. So, you all have been exceptionally generous with your time, with your comments, and as I said in the beginning, this is a conversation. This isn't a one-off. We're not going to go back and check a box and say, hey, we got Windsor and we're done. This is helping to shape our work, our strategic plan. At the end of the November 15th, we have our annual recognition and acknowledgement and celebration of our donors and our stakeholders and our partners. It's called Greater Together. You're all going to be invited. Hopefully, all of you, or if not many of you or most of you, can attend. Because what it does, it recaps the current year, but really looks forward to the next year. And the things that we've talked about, the things you shared with us, are going to really, as I said, inform our strategic plan, and you're going to see and hear how that has impacted our work. We're also hoping to unveil and talk about some specific things that we're going to do to anchor ourselves more deeply in the 29 communities with resources and commitments and capacity building that would address any number of things that we've talked about here. So more to come. Stay tuned. Thank you all for your time, for your passion, for your generosity to the foundation, whether it's with your time, your money, your ideas, your thoughts. There's still, I think, some more catering left, but that being the case, you all have a wonderful evening. We appreciate you coming out.